Dr. Ackermann, Dr. Sooklal, thank you for your time and thank you for joining us here on the News 18 Chopal. So, I'll request you to introduce yourself to the audience. आप अपना परिचय देना चाहेंगे?
नमस्कार जी. मैं That's not so impressive actually, I must say. मैं भारत में जर्मनी का राजदूत हूँ. That's better, no?
नमस्कार, मैं दक्षिण अफ्रीका राजदूत हूँ.
मैं चाहता था कि देखिए इनका भारत से कनेक्शन सिर्फ 4 जनरेशन पुराना नहीं है अनिल जी, बट इट इज ऑल्सो दैट देयर इज स्टिल सम कनेक्ट. सो सबसे पहले लेट मी आस्क यू, 4 generations back you trace your roots to Bharat. Do you still have connect? Where do you hail from? Or do you know your roots? आपको पता है?
Well, I think I'm very fortunate to be sent by my president as South Africa's ambassador to India. My roots are here. The Indian community of South Africa goes back to 1860 under the British indenture system, which is my history. So my great-grandparents left a village somewhere near Varanasi. I've identified the village, and next month I'm going there to look, to find out where my roots are. So in 1892, my great-grandfather left India as an indentured laborer to go and work on the sugar plantations in South Africa. And here I am, part of that history that left India, and I'm very pleased. I say that South Africa is my Janma Bhumi, India is my Karma Bhumi.
Lovely. South Africa इनकी जन्मभूमि और भारत अब इनकी कर्मभूमि. बनारस के पास इनका गांव है पुश्तैनी, जो कहते हैं 5 जनरेशन पहले इनके ग्रेट ग्रेट ग्रैंडफादर जो हैं वो दक्षिण अफ्रीका चले गए. बट डॉक्टर Ackermann, भारत से आपका तारुफ कैसे हुआ? हाउ डिड यू कम टू भारत एंड व्हाट्स योर इंप्रेशन अबाउट अस, भारत एंड भारतीय?
मुझे भारत बहुत पसंद लगते है और मैं भारत में बहुत खुशी हूँ. It's a fabulous country. It's full of miracles and wonders. And what my South African friend's story with his ancestral history is that they came from Eastern UP and migrated under restrained and very difficult circumstances to South Africa. I have also a little Indian angle. That is, my grandfather, who was at that time the vice chancellor of Aachen University, a very, very good technical university of Germany, was the one with a circle of professors who set up IIT Madras in the early 60s. And I'm very proud that IIT Madras is still the sort of most renowned school of technical training in India. And when I went there to visit it, they were so sweet and made a little book of all the documents and photos they still had, and I was very touched. So was my mother, because she saw her father back. And I must say, it's great to see that this investment in the early 60s has flourished to such a wonderful level. So that's great.
तो डॉक्टर Ackermann ये कह रहे हैं कि इनके ग्रैंडफादर, इन्होंने IIT मद्रास की स्थापना में मदद की थी. तो अगर आप IIT मद्रास जाइएगा आज, तो उनके हेरिटेज सेंटर में इनके ग्रैंडफादर की तस्वीर वहां पर है एज वन ऑफ द फाउंडर्स ऑफ एंड द फर्स्ट एकेडमिक टीम जो आई थी IIT मद्रास की स्थापना करने में. और आज आप जानते हैं कि भारत का सबसे प्रीमियर इंस्टीट्यूट माना जाता है IIT मद्रास. एंड डॉक्टर Ackermann, आई मस्ट टेल यू, जस्ट रिसेंटली आई वाज एट IIT मद्रास and I saw the pictures.
Good. I'm happy to see that. Hear that. It's a wonderful school, and when you go, you feel it's a top-notch school. I would recommend every German students to go and spend some time there, because it's cutting edge what you get taught there.
Okay. Now let's talk some shop. Bharat ka connection ho gaya. Now let's look at Anil ji. How do you view BRICS? And when Donald Trump says BRICS is non-funct, BRICS does not work, what is your view? Or what is South Africa's view?
Well, I think BRICS is a reality of the current global order. And when someone says it has no relevance and it's fracturing, it means they're afraid of that structure. And I think that's a positive thing. Look, BRICS, if you look at why BRICS was formed, and the environment in which it was formed, it's because of the manner in which the global polity has been functioning since the United Nations system was created. We celebrate the 80th anniversary of the UN this year, but actually there's nothing to celebrate. In fact, in 1945, when the UN came together, only 4 African countries were present: Ethiopia, Egypt, Liberia, and the Union of South Africa, not Democratic South Africa. 4 African countries were party to the UN Charter. So yes, it was necessary, given what had happened, the Second World War. We needed a global architecture based on the rule of law and based on the UN Charter. But the world of 1945 and the world of 2025 is poles apart. And yet there has been no significant or no reform at all of this architecture. And then if you look at post the Arab-Israeli crisis of the early 1970s, and when oil first time became the new gold, and the energy crisis, the G7 came together. And they came together, well, initially 1975, G6, Canada joined a year later, as the most powerful economies. But they were not. The USSR was the second most powerful economy. Because it was a communist regime, they excluded it. And China was bigger than some of the other G7 at that stage. They excluded China. But they created an exclusive club, and to address the so-called ills of the geo-economic, geo-financial architecture at that time. But then it became a club that concentrated on the global north in the main. And it also took over much of the mandate of the United Nations system. What you saw at the turn of this millennium, which the 1998 World Bank report alludes to, is a new development in the global south. The global south was starting to rise. Countries like China, India, Brazil, even in Africa, we transformed from the OAU to the African Union. So the south started rising, and countries of the south recognized that there was no voice to deal with issues pertaining to 85% of the global population. And it is out of this environment that leaders from the global south felt we needed a structure. The north has a structure, the G7, what was G8 for a small period of time, and went back to G7. So BRICS came out of necessity to champion the cause of the global south. Now, imagine the current geopolitical environment. Remove BRICS from this environment. Where's the voice and where's the champion for the global south today? In this world that is fracturing even more, the divide between the north and south is not getting narrower, it's getting larger. And therefore you needed a powerful forum. And BRICS has become a powerful forum. I spent 13 years as South Africa's BRICS Sherpa. So I saw BRICS rising from a very small entity. Today we have 10 full members, 11 partner countries, and about 30 countries knocking on the door, wanting to become partners. Why? Obviously BRICS is doing something right. And the fact of the matter, we live in a global society where the era of a rules-based global society is something of the past, unfortunately. The United Nations system is paralyzed. Your Security Council is totally paralyzed. It did nothing in terms of the Gaza war. It can do nothing in terms of the Russia-Ukraine war. What is going on in Sudan? Where is this body entrusted with peacekeeping, global peacekeeping today? And that's because, in the words of the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, the UN Security Council is irrelevant, it needs reforming, and it's not fit for purpose anymore.
You are echoing Dr. Jaishankar because he repeated the same. The G20 in Bharat also saw the inclusion of the Africa group of nations into the G20, and it became far more open and democratic. Dr. Ackermann, agree, disagree that the rules-based system is over? It's a different...
I'm a diplomat. I can't say it is really over, but I think it's really threatened. I think that it is, and I think my South African friend here is completely right. The United Nations system is blocked. There is nothing moving on. We feel Germany, India, Brazil, and Japan are fighting for a reform of the Security Council, which is overdue. I mean, India needs to be at the table. So need African nations, and that is going nowhere right now. And when you see the growing dichotomy between China and the US and Russia, you don't see that forum, the Security Council, really moving anywhere. So I think, Dr. Jaishankar says we are going from multilateral to minilateral. We are trying to form smaller fora of nations, of national corporations, multilateral corporations. That is more fruitful, and that is better for India. And I think that it's a fair point actually to see. But I would say that we should not stop striving for this system to work. We are of the opinion that a rules-based international order is the only thing that makes the world somehow advance in an orderly manner. And therefore, my appeal to everybody is, let's try to make it work, as difficult as it may seem right now.
Okay. Rules-based international order should work, but it's not working because not everybody is following the rules. And Ambassador Anil Sooklal ने एक बात की कि यूएन ने कहां पर शांति की बात की. गाजा का सोल्यूशन यूएन ने नहीं निकाला, रूस यूक्रेन पर कुछ नहीं कर पाया, सूडान में कुछ नहीं कर पाया, ऑपरेशन सिंदूर में भी कुछ नहीं कर पाया. आप दोनों थे यहां भारत में when Operation Sindoor happened. What's your perception about it, Dr. Ackermann? Did Donald Trump stop the war, or is it two nations and its armies who decided to show restraint, especially Bharat?
So I would say that when you want to know what happened, listen to the participants, that's what I would say. And in this case, we have heard clearly what the Indian side has said of this matter. I think we had a moment of tension and a moment of nervousness. We also felt it at our embassy, where people were really tense and didn't know what happened. But my take when I talk about Sindoor back in Europe, I always say, look at what happened. After 4 days, both sides decided to stop. And that is something which is, I think, of a proof of great maturity in a way, because look at all the conflicts we see in the world. Nothing stops. Nothing stops quickly. It takes years and years and years until some progress is made. But here we had two nations that fought each other hard. But after 4 days, they decided, both of them, that it would be better to stop. Now, does it change the overall situation between Pakistan and India? Certainly not. But the fact that the war stopped shows that people had understood that it would be to everybody's detriment if the war continued. And therefore, I would say I'm very impressed by this decision that after 4 days, let's stop.
But is that a sign of weakness, Ambassador Anil ji? If I may ask you, High Commissioner, is that a sign of weakness that despite having the advantage, you press the pause button, you back off? Because everybody, a lot of people fault Bharat or internally also. Ki aap ruk kyun gaye?
No, I see it as a sign of strength, a sign of maturity, and a sign of a country that's showing global leadership. Because war has not brought victory to anyone. Look at the situation in Gaza. There's no winners and losers. We are all losers. 70,000 lives gone. I think it was the wisdom of the Indian leadership to recognize, yes, you had to respond to what happened in Pahalgam. You made your response, but you recognize the larger picture. Because what does war do? War take away lives. They rob families. They rob children of the parents. The devastation that it causes to the environment, to other forms of life, leave alone human life. So I think it's a great sign of strength and maturity that you took this decision, even though being here in Delhi, when I speak to my fellow Indian friends, there was in some circle great anger. They said, no, India should have gone and finished the job. But it's not about that. It takes great leadership, great strength. And India is a major power today. And when you have power, you have to show responsibility. And I think that's what India demonstrated.
Can I say a word?
Sure.
Because I think you are completely right. I would echo every word you said. This country has an ambition. This country knows where it wants to be. Yeah? This country, You can call it Viksit Bharat, you can call it, development on many levels. There is a strong feeling that this country wants to go somewhere and wants to take its population along. And war has no role in this. And that is right. And I would say it's a sign of utter strength that if you weigh your options, you say, I'm going for the Viksit Bharat option rather than the other one.
The Viksit Bharat option. You're saying there is an ambition, there is a goal, and as Prime Minister says, this is not the era of war, this is the era of working together and collaborating and working for development. But can people or nations weaponize tariffs and impose who you should trade with and who you should not? Is that fair to any country? Ambassador?
Well, it's unfortunate that we live in an era where trade has been weaponized, and where the very bodies that have been entrusted to oversee global trade, the World Trade Organization, has been rendered almost irrelevant by a party that refuses to address one of the key challenges that has impacted on the functioning of the WTO, its dispute settlement mechanism. But the fact that in this era of tariffs, what we have done, we have created a new era of transactional global economics. That's what's happened. Global economics today is transactional. And you had a party, and as I've said, one of the things that we learned in South Africa through our own democratic transition and the peaceful transition we had, the apartheid regime was very powerful, had the most powerful military in the African continent. The African National Congress was forced into military confrontation. But we recognize that regime is very powerful. But sanctions brought that regime to its knees. Now, what is happening on the global front? And it's unfortunate, all of the 5 BRICS countries have been targeted. You have been hit with 50% tariffs. Russia is already under sanctions. Brazil has been hit with heavy sanctions. South Africa, highest sanctions in Africa, 30%. And the whole thing is directed against those countries of the global south that actually matter. China is being threatened with 100% tariffs. And it is these countries who should be working collectively with our partners from the global north. And I'd like to say our partners from the global north are in a very difficult position. I've never, in my over 3 decades as a diplomat, seen a head of state come and chastise another head of state. That's just not on the cards, and that's not how we behave in terms of creating a more inclusive global order. So tariffs is being used. Unfortunately today, power and might is right. That is the norm today. If you're powerful, you flex your muscles. Leaders are afraid. Last week, to give you an example how the G20 is being undermined. Last week, South Africa hosted the G20 trade ministers meeting.
Yes.
Do you know how many ministers were present at that meeting? Because your trade ministers meeting is one of your most important meetings. Why was the G20 created? To address the economic and financial fault lines post the 2008 crisis. There were 6 ministers there. So countries are even afraid to go and take the platform that they may utter something that may offend one party and they'll be hit with another 50% tariff. This is the tragedy of where we are. And I think countries of the global south, we need to stand together. We are not weak. The global south is powerful today. It is this part of the world, countries like India and China, that's the most buoyant in getting the global economy to remain vibrant.
But it's not easy, Ambassador Ackermann, Dr. Ackermann. It's not easy for a nation that's wanting to rise, has a Viksit Bharat story and has a growth story, to actually stand up. Do you think what Bharat's position has been, it's not reacted to provocations by Trump, it's tried to say we'll continue to engage? How easy or difficult is it? And Germany is a very important partner for Bharat, so that's why I'd like to know. As is South Africa. Yeah.
I think, the reaction of the Indian side was, as usual, extremely measured and very wise and diplomatically, I think, smart. But what does it show, this new politics of tariffs, imposing tariffs? For me, it's very difficult to understand that the richest country on earth feels ripped off all the time. I don't understand. How is India ripping off the US? I don't understand. But what I think the lesson Europe has for that is free trade. We have to open up. And what I would say in this context is the FTA, the free trade agreement, India and the European Union are about to close or agree upon by the end of this year, is the right counterweight in a way. I think you have to open up your markets in order to get more investment and in order to get more trade flowing between the nations. And, we have seen the incredible development here, economic development over the last couple of years, and it always had a very global angle, although I think the development politically was always in a protectionist mode. But when you look at the private sector of India, it's very global-minded. It goes across the continents. And therefore, I think this FTA, and in a way Trump helps here, I would say, is very, very important to conclude by the end of this year. So I'm very happy that we have made progress. And I think both sides, the European side and the Indian side, are determined to come to an agreement that will certainly change the way Indian business is moving ahead and abroad, and European business is moving into India. Into India.
We're running out of time, but दो प्रश्न आप दोनों से पूछना चाहूंगा. Final two questions. One is, in Bharat there is this whole argument about Sanskrit. Will you tell our viewers, is Sanskrit important or not?
So we have, or in Europe I would say, we have two old languages that are not alive anymore, ancient Greek and Latin. And there are schools, and I went to such a school, that teach very thoroughly Latin and Greek. So I had 9 years in my school time, I learned Latin. It was the basis of all my language knowledge that I have now. So it is an excellent basis for understanding how language works. The thing is in India, of course, that every Indian is multilingual. You speak English, you speak Hindi, you speak certainly not another Indian language, an Indian official or non-official language. And that makes it sometimes a little difficult to understand why you should put Sanskrit on top. But I would say a Sanskrit education is education that shows you where your language comes from and is helpful in acquiring the knowledge of other languages. In my country, there is an old tradition of Sanskrit, funny enough, but there was in the 19th century already, there was a love for Sanskrit, and there is an old tradition of what we call Indology, which is Sanskrit studies in Germany. So when you want to become a Sanskrit scholar, Germany offers quite a lot of possibilities.
देखिए, संस्कृत हमारी भाषा है, लेकिन जर्मनी में इंडोलॉजी और आप वहाँ पे मेजर कर सकते हैं. But I believe a lot of our old texts are also there in the German libraries.
We have a very good collection of Sanskrit texts, which we share very happily with the Indian side. We have very good academic connections between Indologists in India and in Germany. And I think it is one of our bonds, as you rightly say, between Germany and India, that we have this academic tradition, the love for this ancient India, which we share.
True. Anil ji, final question to you. Kashi Vishwanath कब जा रहे हैं? Kashi Vishwanath कब जा रहे हैं? Darshan.
I've already been there. Twice, and I will go again next month.
Lovely. Thank you, Ambassador Anil Sooklal and Ambassador Dr. Ackermann. Thank you very much, Dr. Philipp Ackermann. Thank you so much.